Thank you for joining us, everyone. So today we will be speaking about MOR-EV, and we'll explain the program, and we'll talk about some stackable incentives, both with MOR-EV and the federal tax credit. We'll start with an EV 101, we'll go into charging, and then we'll finish with some real examples of used EVs, and we'll see how those incentives stack up. And what's really great is a lot of them are available near us. Okay. So we're from Green Energy Consumers Alliance. So we're a nonprofit based in Massachusetts and Rhode Island with an organizational mission of empowering consumers and communities to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. We've been around since 1982. We do a lot of programming around clean energy, efficiency, very community focused. Our Drive Green program started in 2016 and has really evolved since then. We started with the mission to educate consumers about the benefits of EVs, and we even provided a platform through which they could buy EVs. We worked with local dealers and did a lot of outreach. But since then, since the pandemic, and since as market trends have shifted, we're now completely focused on outreach and events. And so we're lucky to work with community partners and facilitate ride and drives. We know that experiencing an EV and being in the car on your own can really help to internalize all that we're talking about today. So we're excited to, share this presentation with you. So the Department of Energy Resources, or the DOER, is partnered with the Center for Sustainable Energy, or CSE, and they administer the MOR-EV program. The DOER does a lot of statewide and energy programs they facilitate, and CSE is a national nonprofit organization, and their mission is to accelerate the adoption of clean transportation. That's where MOR-EV comes into play. So we'll first start with defining MOR-EV. It's a rebate program through MOR-EV. There are various rebates for battery electric vehicles and fuel cell EVs. There are a few subsets of rebates under the program. There is a standard rebate, and that's $3,500. And then there is a used rebate that is also $3,500. There's an income qualifying additional $1,500. And there is MOR-EV trade-in, that's an additional $1,000. There's also a $7,500 rebate for electric pickup trucks and other Class 2B vehicles, which we will go over today, but we'll spend less time on those rebates. And luckily, point of sale is available for standard, MOR-EV Used, and MOR-EV Plus. These can all be combined. We'll get into the specifics in just a little bit. So today, like I mentioned, we're going to start with an EV 101. We'll get into charging. We'll talk about some of the benefits of EVs on a public health perspective and from an economical perspective. Then we'll do a deep dive into MOR-EV. We'll talk about the pre-qualification process and how to access the rebates. We'll also talk about the federal tax credit because these incentives can be stacked. And we'll finish with a Q&A. So if you have any questions, if you want to drop them in the chat, we'll spend some time at the end of the presentation to address your comments and questions. Start with some EV 101. So we'll start with a battery electric vehicle. These are for drivers who want to achieve zero tailpipe emissions and have access to charging. They're battery powered fully. Most BEVs have a range of 60 to 350 miles. More of what we're seeing is 220 plus to the early 300 range with most modern EVs that are on the road right now. They can be fully charged at anywhere from 4 to 10 hours, and this depends on the type and level of charging you are using, as well as your vehicle and the vehicle's onboard capacity. There are lots of EVs out there. I'm sure you may have seen the Equinox EV. There's the Hyundai Ioniq, the Ford Mach-E, all Teslas. So there's a bunch of EVs out there, and we'll look at some real examples. And one other thing is that BEVs can be charged at home or at a public charging station. They require limited maintenance, so you will never need an oil change again. And there's lower fuel costs as well and maintenance costs. We'll get into that in a little bit. There are also plug-in hybrids. I will start by saying that plug-in hybrids do not qualify for the MOR-EV program, although they do qualify for the federal tax credit. So Plug-in hybrids have both a gas engine and a small battery. They're powered by both, and their total range generally is around from 150 to 570 miles, and anywhere from 25 to 53 miles would be purely electric coming from that battery. And that depends on the vehicle and model that you are driving. And these vehicles can be hooked up to a level 1 or a level 2 charger. And depending on that level of charging, your plug-in hybrid can be fully charged in anywhere as little from 1.5 to 10 hours. So it totally depends on the vehicle and the type of charging that you're using. Some examples are the Toyota Prius Prime, Chrysler Pacifica. There's a Toyota RAV4 Prime, that's a plug-in hybrid, the Honda Clarity plug-in hybrid as well. There are also fuel cell EVs, and these are for drivers who like to combine zero-emission driving of a battery electric car with a quick and easy refueling of hydrogen. So they're powered by hydrogen, and refueling generally takes around 3 to 5 minutes, and you would need to fuel at a hydrogen refueling station. There are a couple in New England. Most of the fuel cell EVs on the road are in California. There are more refueling stations there, and the total range is very similar to that of EVs, ranging from 250 to 320 miles in range. And some examples are the Toyota Mirai, there's a Honda Clarity, and there's a Hyundai Nexo as well. And what's great about fuel cell EVs is that actually most manufacturers will provide free refueling for the first 3 years. To provide a brief overview of some of the benefits of EVs, we can know that they reduce or eliminate tailpipe emissions. Battery electric vehicles produce zero tailpipe emissions, but a plug-in hybrid will, because it also is a gas engine. Electric cars greatly reduce air pollution. In Massachusetts alone, more than 95% of air pollution comes from the combustion of fossil fuels, and that includes vehicles on the road. Fewer vehicle emissions will also mean less pollutants for the environment. This improves public health and better air quality within our neighborhoods and communities. We'll talk about fuel costs very quickly. So every few months, we look at fuel costs and we do the math to determine how much you are saving per mile on electricity versus per mile on gas. So we're looking at the price per kilowatt hour at National Grid and Eversource, two utilities in Massachusetts. And we made a couple of assumptions. First, that the efficiency of an EV is 0.3 kilowatts per mile. And then in 2024 and 2025, the average efficiency of a gas car is 28 miles per gallon. And we actually updated this recently because the price of gas recently changed. So at the beginning of May, the average price of gas in New England was $2.96 per gallon. And then I'll go through pretty quickly our process behind that math. So we made those assumptions. We can see that for National Grid, the cost per kilowatt hour right now is around 18 cents. And then versus an Eversource territory, that's 31 cents. So then to calculate that cost per mile of electricity, we can multiply the total cost per kilowatt hour by the assumed efficiency of EVs per mile. So for National Grid, we multiplied 18 cents by 0.3. And we can find that the cost to drive per mile on electricity is around 5 cents. And then we'll repeat that process for Eversource, and the cost to drive per mile on electricity is around 9 cents. Then we calculated the cost to drive per mile on gas. And what that looked like was we divided the average gas price by the assumed fuel efficiency of gas cars. And we found that gas car drivers generally pay around 11 cents per mile on gas. And then we just subtract those two numbers to find how much money you save per mile on electricity versus per gas. So for National Grid customers, as you can see, you'll generally save around 6 cents per mile on electricity than for gas. And for Eversource customers, it's around 2 cents. These numbers do change quarterly. So in June and July, we'll be updating our fuel costs. And when we send our slides, if you're interested in looking at our math and reading more about fuel costs and our methodology, you're welcome to do so. And that's also linked on our Drive Green page on our website. So vehicles in battery electric vehicles generally have a higher range and are more efficient. When I say efficiency, that really refers to how much energy is being used to complete a task. So the higher efficiency, the less waste will produce and the more energy you will get out of it. Total range will take into account efficiency and battery size. You might see that on the left, on the first image, we're looking at many battery electric vehicles, and then we'll have some more plug-in hybrids on the right. You can see that blue refers to electric range, whereas orange refers to gas range. And some of our models are within that 250, 220 to 300 plus range in terms of electric range. And then we can also look at, on the right, the miles per gallon versus the miles per gallon equivalent of all electric cars and gas cars. And miles per gallon equivalent refers to the unit of measurement, and this compares the energy consumption of EVs with that of traditional gas-powered vehicles. So what we have on the left are battery electric vehicles, followed by plug-in hybrids, followed by gas cars. And you might be able to see that the miles per gallon equivalent is more efficient than that of their gas car counterparts far on the right. And then I wanted to briefly talk about maintenance costs before we talk about charging and define the different levels of charging, especially if you're new to EVs. We did mention in the beginning that battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids as well generally have lower maintenance costs than gas cars. And you might be able to see here on this graph that we got from the US Department of Energy that there are a whole orange category right at the top, right where not sure if you can see my mouse, but that this category of costs does not exist for EVs. So this can include transmission service, and this generally is because EVs don't have tailpipes and don't cause tailpipe emissions. So that is what that category of costs is referring to. And if we also are looking at this graph again, if there is an orange-ish, yellowish category that says brake pads, we might know that EVs rarely have to replace their brake pads, and that is very different in contrast to gas cars, largely because EVs have an awesome technology called regenerative braking. So if you are driving your EV and you're rolling to a stop sign, when you lift your foot off the brake, that energy translates to heat and helps to enhance your battery's range. And in general, there's less wear and tear in terms of maintenance costs and with an EV. And Anna is welcome to jump in at any time if you have any other comments. I know there's a lot to go through on terms of maintenance costs, and we can always have a conversation about that in the Q&A if you have any more questions. But we'll move into charging, and we'll briefly just define the different levels of charging and how they work and what most people use. We'll start with level 1. It's the slowest method of charging. It'll utilize a traditional or more conventional 120 volt outlet that you have in your home. This generally only takes place at home because it is a little bit slower and also very easy to set up due to the widespread availability of these types of outlets. That range generally ranges from 3.5 miles to 6.5 miles of charge per hour. So it's pretty slow, but it is also sufficient for drivers who might charge overnight and drive anywhere from 30 to 40 miles per day. So this might be you if you have a plug-in hybrid or a battery EV. If you're driving a plug-in hybrid and that typical range of 30 to 40 miles per day falls within your driving patterns, then that might mean that that type of vehicle or a pure battery electric vehicle is suitable for your lifestyle. Charging cables will come with the vehicle generally, and one will plug right into that outlet. There's no installation required for this because we tend to have these outlets at home. So I'll also say that level 1 charging will generally use a connector or port plug that's called the J1772 plug, or it'll use a Tesla connector that can plug into the EV, or it'll plug through an adapter. And then level 2 charging will generally use a 110 volt We'll move on to level 2. Level 2 is much faster than level 1, and it will require installing a charging station. And what that is called is electric vehicle supply equipment refers to infrastructure changes, including the charging stations that is often referred to as an acronym called EVSE, referring to electrical vehicle supply equipment. So that installation will utilize a 240 volt or a 208 volt electrical circuit. This type of outlet generally powers your washing machine and other heavier duty appliances. And level 2 can be found at public charging stations, very popular at home. Range per hour of charge varies from 14 to 35 miles, depending on the vehicle and also the charger's onboard capacity. So I did mention before that if you charge overnight or drive somewhere between 30 to 50 miles of charge per day, then level 1, or particularly level 2, can be very suitable for most people's driving patterns. And then level 2 will also use a standard J1772 plug or a Tesla connector that can plug right into an EV. And so I think we'll talk about this a little bit later in the presentation, but when I say Tesla connector, I just refer to the fact that many major manufacturers are adopting a port that's referred to as the North American Charging Standard. It is the same port that Tesla vehicles use, so many vehicles and many manufacturers are making available adapters for EV drivers to plug in to their vehicle if they're charging at a public charging station, and more vehicles as well that are coming on the road are having that NACS port as a native feature that's already in the vehicle that does not require an adapter. All right. And then we'll also talk about DC fast charging. This is very fast, very energy intensive, and are only found at public charging stations. And so this will generally use a higher voltage because it takes a lot of energy. Your vehicle will be able to reach anywhere from 0 or 10 to 80% of a full charge in as little as 30 minutes. That can translate to about 100 miles. So it's very fast. You can see that this image here, this charging station is 480 volts. So that's quite a big difference from what we were talking about with level 1 and level 2. Well, in the next slide, we'll talk about where you can find charging near you. And there are a lot of level 2 and DC fast charging stations in the area. And these DC fast chargers sometimes will involve a NACS, will be a NACS port if the Tesla supercharging station, or a J1772 or a CHAdeMO plug, which we may or may not talk about in the presentation, but we can surely address that in the Q&A. And then I'll get into charging in terms of where to find charging. This is a screenshot from PlugShare. PlugShare is a mapping tool that allows users to identify charging stations near them. So it functions similarly to Google Maps in the sense that you can plug in your location anywhere in the world. These are two areas. This is Eastern Mass and Western Mass. We wanted to be as inclusive as possible just to showcase the fact that there are a lot of charging stations. There are more closer to Boston as well, in other parts of the state. Just for the sake of these two screenshots, we had to zoom out quite a bit to show case wider areas. You might notice though, there's different colors going on in this slide. So you might see that the green icons refer to level 2 chargers and charging stations, and orange refers to DC fast charging stations. And then there are also different icons with tools, and that really refers to charging stations that are currently being built. And this map gets updated all of the time, so I encourage you to plug in your location or close to where you drive, maybe for work, and to see what type of charging stations are near you. One last thing I'll mention about PlugShare is that it is open source. So what that means is if you go to a charging station and it's full and people are using it, you might be able to see that in real time. Or likewise, if a charging station that has been in construction, if it's fully operational now, you'll see that. And if there's a maintenance issue, you'll also see reports of that on the app. So highly recommend taking a look there. Now we'll finally get into the gist of MOR-EV and the program. We already really talked about the different subsets of rebates under MOR-EV, and we'll get into how you can stack the different rebates that we talked about. So we'll spend a little bit more time on this slide because this is a really good graphic that dictates what the rebates are and which can be received at the point of sale. So MOR-EV standard covers new and light duty vehicles, and that's $3,500, and that's the same amount of value for MOR-EV used. And those are for light duty vehicles. Both of those rebates can be received at the point of sale or post-purchase. And there is a time period post-purchase through which you can apply online. Then there is an income qualifying rebate adder, and that is an additional $1,500 that you can stack on to that $3,500. And then lastly, there are rebates for trucks. So for pickup trucks, this is a $7,500 rebate, and it must be a purely battery electric vehicle or fuel cell EV, and must weigh between 6,000 and 10,000 pounds. That's pretty heavy. And then what we won't talk about today there's also MOR-EV trucks, and that's a rebate for much heavier vehicles. And if you are part of a business or a nonprofit organization or any institution, you might take advantage of that program in case you are looking to electrify your fleet. And then in terms of eligibility requirements for MOR-EV standard, that is the $3,500 rebate for new light duty EVs. You must be a resident of Massachusetts, or you must be a business or nonprofit organization that's licensed here and located here. In terms of vehicle eligibility, it must be a new battery electric vehicle or fuel cell EV, and the total price limit must be $55,000 or less. And there is also an eligible vehicle list, which I think we'll have an image of. It's a really cool tool if you're on the MOR-EV website and navigate to participating vehicles. You can search a type of vehicle name, and then the site will tell you very plainly if that vehicle qualifies. And if it does qualify, where to find it if you'd like. And then in terms of program eligibility, if you are leasing, you must be leasing for at least a period of 36 months. Now, MOR-EV used is that $3,500 rebate for used light duty EVs. Again, you must be a Massachusetts resident. You must also be participating in an approved income qualifying program, or you have to prove that your modified adjusted gross income does not exceed either $150,000 if you are filing taxes jointly, $112,000 if you are a head of a household, or that limit is $75,000 if you file taxes individually. And then for vehicle eligibility, the vehicle must be a used battery electric or fuel cell EV. The model year must at least be 2 years prior to the calendar year you are purchasing or leasing in. And then that MSRP or purchase price limit is $40,000 or less in the scenario. And you may not have received, the vehicle might not have received the rebate in the last 36 months. And then that leasing term, again, is 36 months in this, for this MOR-EV used rebate. And then to prove your eligibility, you must be a Massachusetts resident, and you must participate in an income qualified program or you must be able to prove that your adjusted gross income does fall under those limits. These are a few of the programs that you might be involved in that will indicate that you are eligible for MOR-EV used. So Mass Save is an example, LIHEAP is another example as well as SNAP. And there is a pre-qualification process to receive that rebate at the point of sale. And these are some more qualifying programs for MOR-EV use and MOR-EV Plus. Again, we still see Mass Health. There's also the Low-Income Weatherization Assistance Program. So there's a full list here, and we can send that list as a part of the slides when we send that out to you at the end of this webinar. In terms of MOR-EV trucks, again, you must be a Massachusetts resident, or you're a private business that is licensed to do business here, or you're a nonprofit or an educational institution or a part of the local, municipal, or state governments. that are located and operating in Massachusetts. And in terms of vehicle eligibility, the vehicle or truck must have a gross vehicle weight rating that's in between 6,000 to 10,000 pounds. And can be of any body type. So this can be considered a heavy duty truck. It might be a larger pickup truck or a utility van. And that total price limit is $80,000. And that leasing term is still 36 months. If you are looking to apply for MOR-EV trucks, you may also be eligible for MOR-EV Plus. So when we talk about how these rebates can stack, this is an example. You might use MOR-EV Used and MOR-EV Plus, or if you're looking for a truck, you could do that as well. There are some more incentives for heavier vehicles on the MOR-EV website, but for the sake of brevity, we will can send those links when we finish the presentation. And then for MOR-EV trade-in, so MOR-EV trade-in means you might have an older gas car, and you're able to trade that in and receive $1,000 as a part of this rebate. Again, you are a resident of Massachusetts, and you must be trading in an eligible older gas car. And that vehicle must still have a market value, must be at least 12 years old, and must have been registered in Massachusetts to you, the applicant, or your immediate family for at least 2 years prior to the day you are trading in. And then to receive that rebate, you would apply online. You have a period of 90 days after purchasing or leasing to submit your required documentation. And generally, you would receive this after receiving MOR-EV standard or used at the point of sale. So this is a post-purchase rebate. And you have a 90-day period to submit that documentation after you've purchased or leased the vehicle in question. We'll talk about the pre-qualification process for both MOR-EV Used and MOR-EV Plus. So there is a website. When you go to MOR-EV.org, there is a big button to apply, and that is an online portal. You can create an account. It's pretty user-friendly, and you can submit your documentation on this portal. And so for the MOR-EV Plus income qualifying rebate, only individuals may apply for that pre-qualification voucher, and this voucher must be received before purchasing or leasing a vehicle. And if you are trying to submit and get that pre-qualification voucher, you would indicate which income qualifying program you participate in, or you may submit some information such as a W-2 to confirm that your adjusted gross income falls below those income limits. You would also upload your driver's license from the state of Massachusetts. And then again, you might qualify for MOR-EV Plus. You can combine this with MOR-EV Used or MOR-EV Standard. And then for MOR-EV Used, again, only individuals can apply for this pre-qualification voucher. That is done online. It must be done before purchasing or leasing the vehicle. And you might still qualify for MOR-EV Used if you don't participate in income qualifying program based on your income and tax filing status. Again, if your adjusted gross income falls below a certain limit. So you can upload that information, and the pre-qualification voucher will confirm that you are indeed eligible. And then you can bring that pre-qualification voucher to the dealership to receive that rebate at the point of sale. Or if you'd like to receive it at tax time, you generally have a period of 90 days. We'll get on to the federal clean vehicle tax credit pretty quickly, and we'll talk about what the federal clean vehicle tax credit is. And as a disclaimer, must mention that as a part of Green Energy Consumers Alliance and as a part of the team doing outreach for MOR-EV, we cannot provide tax or accounting advice, and we always encourage consumers to consult a tax professional for any specific information that might apply to their unique situation when thinking about applying for the federal clean vehicle tax credit. So for new vehicles, there is a clean vehicle tax credit. This is up to $7,500 on eligible vehicles that meet specific battery and assembly requirements. This is valid through 2032, so it covers plug-in hybrids as well as fuel cell EVs and battery electric EVs. And the vehicle must be purchased from an IRS registered dealership. As of within the last year, there is not a finalized list of dealerships that are IRS registered. So our advice is speaking to the dealership directly and confirming they have access to the energy credits online portal and that they are IRS registered so that they can administer and the federal clean vehicle tax credit and their paperwork for you. There are income requirements for the tax credit, and that is $150,000 for individual filers, and then $225,000 if you are a head of household. And if you are a joint filer, that is $300,000. And I mentioned there are some specific eligibility requirements pertaining to minerals and battery components. And in terms of assembly location, starting in 2025, vehicle assembly must be taking place in North America. There is a price cap of $55,000 for sedans and hatchbacks, whereas bigger and heavier vehicles such as SUVs, vans, and pickup trucks have a limit of $80,000. And there are some sets of mineral and battery requirements as well. Oh, and we are linking as well a list of eligible cars. And that will take you directly to the fueleconomy.gov site, and you can input the model year you are thinking of, the year you are purchasing, and the site will give you a drop-down list of vehicles that qualify for the federal tax credit. Those battery and mineral requirements, as well as assembly location requirements, did get stricter every year. So that rule I mentioned about assembly taking place in North America began at the list of beginning of 2025. So that list is a little bit different than it was in 2024, but I encourage you to take a look, and that will be linked when we send the slides. And then in terms of the mineral and battery requirements, that credit amount might be split in half if a vehicle were to meet one battery requirement, or if the vehicle were to meet the qualifications of both, that would be the full $7,500. Okay. Perfect. And there is also a loophole for leasing. And through the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, there was created a commercial vehicle tax credit, and there are not the same eligibility requirements as the clean vehicle credit. So we sometimes can refer to this as a leasing loophole. So essentially, dealerships would claim this commercial vehicle tax credit when they may acquire vehicles from their manufacturers that they will then lease. And then many dealers pass on that as savings to consumers as a either discount right off the price of the vehicle when they're choosing to lease, or in the form of lower monthly payments. So you might see that advertised if you're looking at vehicles that are on different manufacturers' websites. You might see, oh, a $7,500 upfront lease rebate. That is often comes from the commercial vehicle tax credit. And so again, I will point out that because some of those, the assembly requirement being made in the United States did come into place this past year, and some of those mineral and battery requirements do get stricter every year. Leasing is a great alternative because those battery mineral requirements are not as stringent and are not required for the commercial vehicle tax credit. So leasing is a good alternative, and we've been hearing about a lot of good and affordable lease deals lately in the last few months. And then there is also a used clean vehicle tax credit. Those battery requirements do not apply in this case. So there is a limit, a price limit, and that essentially means that the vehicle must cost less than $25,000 and be at least 2 years old. And in terms of the credit itself, that would either be $4,000 or 30% of the value of the sales price. Whichever amount is lower, the vehicle must be bought from a dealership. And there is also a lower income threshold. As you may see, that is $150,000 for joint filers versus a $75,000 limit for individual filers. And then if you are a head of household, that is $112,000 and $112,500. In terms of claiming the credit, you might choose to transfer the tax credit liability to the IRS registered dealership, and that would be taking it at the point of sale, or you can also take the credit when filing taxes. If you do decide to receive it at the point of sale, there is a form that you must fill out. And I think we might get into that in the next slide, but we can link that form. Your dealer will have a period of 3 days to submit your information onto what's called the Energy Credits Online portal. And we always confirm checking up with the dealership as soon as possible to make sure that those steps have been done to ensure that you can receive the credit at tax time. If you choose to receive it at the point of sale and to receive cash, you might apply this towards the down payment, or you can apply the credit towards the cost of the EV. And then if taken at the time of sale, you want to assess the rebate, and this will be regardless of your tax liability for both new and used battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids, since those are included as well. And it is important to note that when filing taxes, when filling out that form, I believe it's form 8936 on the IRS website, we will link it. If you are interested in receiving the tax credit at the point of sale, you can only claim up to your federal tax liability. If you have any questions about that, we're happy to address them when we do a Q&A. And I believe I already touched upon this a little bit, but you want to confirm that your expected income is under that required limit that we mentioned. And then in terms of making sure that the dealership is registered with the IRS and has access to the Energy Credits Online portal, you must speak with a salesperson or a general manager to confirm that that dealership is registered with the IRS. And again, can confirm via access to the Energy Credits Online portal. And the dealership can also, if you're on the fence about purchasing from a specific dealership, you might ask the salesperson or general manager, whoever you speak to confirm that the vehicle that you are considering qualifies for the federal tax credit. And they are able to give you that confirmation if they are IRS registered, because they have access to the Energy Credits Online portal. And then after purchasing, you must receive a time of sale report submitted by the dealer and a copy of the confirmation from the IRS of successful submission onto the Energy Credits Online portal. And they do have that period of 3 days after purchasing. So I do recommend following up with them as soon as possible, and it's essential that you receive that time of sale report. And then again, during tax season, if you are looking to receive it at tax time, that form is called Form 8936, and you must do this if you do not normally file taxes, or even if you receive it at the point of sale. So that form must be filled out if you receive it at the point of sale, or if you're looking to receive it at tax time. Again, we can make sure that form is linked if you are looking to access that tax credit. And as we move into some of our real life examples of battery electric vehicles that are available and nearby, and how we look at some of these incentives and how they stack up to add to more savings, I do want to point out our EV Finder. This is a tool that we recently revamped and improved. It's on our Drive Green website. It's a good tool to compare different EVs. This includes plug-in hybrids as well, so you can filter and sort by different criteria. If you live, well, this is for MOR-EV, so we all live in Massachusetts here, but if you were to live in Rhode Island, you can look at that as well. You can filter and sort by criteria like range and lowest possible cost after incentives are applied. So this will be linked as well when we send out those slides. So our first example will be a Chevy Bolt EUV. This might be a used vehicle. As we can see, the years which it was made were 2022 to 2023. We took our information from Kelley Blue Book in terms of looking at the price range. The range for this vehicle is around 257 miles, and according to Kelley Blue Book, a fair price range for the lower trim model is between $17,460 and $20,841. And for the Chevy Bolt EUV, there are around 15 used models for sale within a 25-mile radius of Boston. So now we'll look at a real example. We took an example from a dealership that is within 25 miles from Boston, specifically from where a Jamaica Plain office is located. So if you are located in a different part of Greater Boston, there might be a bigger number of Chevy Bolt EUVs available. So this was a real life example. This is a 2022 Bolt EUV, and it has mileage life of 32,286 miles. The price that it's listed as is $20,450. This meets the price limit requirement for the federal used clean vehicle tax credit. So we know that it qualifies for that $4,000 amount, and it also qualifies for MOR-EV used. So we can subtract both of those rebates from that original price, and we can get $12,950. However, if we are income qualifying and participate in a program, or if our adjusted gross income limit falls between that income limit that we talked about, that is $1,500 off as well. And if we qualify for MOR-EV trade-in, and if we have an old gas car that we're trading in, our final price would be $10,450. So those last two rebates may or may not, apply to your situation. And without that, we're still looking at quite reduced sales price of $12,950 for Chevy Bolt EUV. We have one more example that we'll look at as well. We also can look at a Hyundai Kona. And so the Hyundai Kona has been on the road for a while. In this case, we will look at a used Kona to highlight the MOR-EV used. But we're taking an example. The range generally is 258 miles for the Kona, and that fair price range, according to Kelley Blue Book, is between $18,099 to $21,898. For this specific model, there are 3 used models for sale within 25 miles of Boston, particularly from the area of our Jamaica Plain office. So depending on where you are based within Massachusetts, there is a higher likelihood that there are more than 3 used Hyundai Konas available near you, or within a higher mileage radius as well. To look at a real example, this is taken from a dealership that one of those 3 that are within that 25-mile radius of us. This is a 2022 Hyundai Kona, and that has a mileage lifespan of 22,580 miles so far. It is listed as $16,900 as that price. It qualifies for the federal used tax credits. That's $4,000 off. And then if we subtract MOR-EV used and savings, that's an additional subtraction of $3,500. So then we're left with $9,400. And if we qualify for MOR-EV Plus, we'll subtract $1,500 to reach $7,900. And then if we qualify for MOR-EV trade-in, that's an even smaller $6,900. So we highlighted these 2 car examples to show that with MOR-EV and MOR-EV being stackable with different subsets of rebates and the federal tax credits, when you add up all of the rebates, you can really save quite a lot. And I'd love to highlight that $9,400 is quite a big difference from $16,900. And so yeah, I encourage you to look at our EV Finder, and Kelley Blue Book is a great tool for assessing fair prices out there. We do have a used car finder as well, and we take a lot of our data from Kelley Blue Book, and we put that all in one place. And then so that really summarizes our MOR-EV presentation. I do want to take a minute to highlight a couple of our upcoming events. We will be at Somerville's e-mobility expo tomorrow. There will be an EV showcase, so if you're in the area, I'd love to see you. We are likely hosting a EV ride and drive up in Pittsfield at their block party next weekend. So if you live in Western Mass and are in town for Memorial Day weekend, I'd love to see you. We also are hosting a series that covers charging. So we already covered charging basics and charging at home. Those webinar recordings are available on our website. We have our next webinar in that series, public charging and charging on the go, coming up in June. And we have another webinar going over used car market. And if you're thinking about getting an EV and are considering a used EV, that might be a good webinar to tune into. And I'll highlight one other event. If you live in the greater Boston area, we will be at the City of Boston's EV Ride and Drive. This will be later in July, and I'm still waiting for an event registration for that, or a flyer. So if you are interested, we can surely keep you in the loop, and that'll certainly be on our events page as we get closer to July. Before we move on to the Q&A, I would love to highlight our MOR-EV survey. This helped us to assess general EV awareness in our community. It's a quick survey. I'll give maybe a couple of moments in case folks wanted to scan that QR code before we move on to the Q&A. We also have a demographic survey that we'd love to invite you to take. Through the survey, we like to assess if our clean energy programming and education is reaching a broad population. It's anonymized, and there is a chance to win some gift cards if you are interested in helping to complete the survey. I'll also spend a second before we move on to the Q&A in case any folks would like to scan the QR code. And all of these surveys, all of this information, and all of the relevant links we mentioned will be in the slides and in the email that we send out to all attendees and registrants after the webinar. And then as we move into Q&A, I invite you to email Anna or myself if you have any questions about the information that we covered today. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. We'd love to stay in touch. Invite you to tune into our Drive Green community group on Facebook or join our newsletter. There's a lot happening right now. We'd love to keep in touch. Anna, do we have any questions for the Q&A?
We do. So first of all, thank you, Caroline, for an excellent presentation. And for those of you who put questions in the chat, please do add more questions if you have them. I want to note one question was, do we share a recording of this? Yes, we do. So look out for an email from Caroline tomorrow or early next week with the slides as well as a recording of the webinar. And then secondly, somebody asked whether there'd be further discussion of charging suggestions or best practices. This webinar is really focused on the stackable incentives. We didn't have enough time to talk about charging, but as Caroline mentioned, we had 2 webinars recently, one on charging basics and then one on charging at home. And I put into the Q&A responses the links to the recordings of those 2 webinars, as well as the link to sign up for the 3rd one in the series, which is all about charging on the go. So we hope you can join us there. In terms of open questions, I have one question about buying a used EV, whether we have data on car model battery performance. I will give a cautious yes. So historically, when we've done this webinar before, there was data available on battery degradation by vehicle model. Quite frankly, we haven't updated the slides yet, so I haven't double checked if that data is still available, but there was a tool, and I can't remember the name of the company right now, excuse me, I'll try and find it, but it showed battery degradation by vehicle year model make for some key models where there is data available. I will say that Recurrent Auto is a good resource. They have a lot of data about real life EV performance from their customers that they make public. So that will be our first stop. We use their data for our winter driving webinar where we talk about how different vehicle models fare in the cold. And I'm pretty sure that they have data on battery performance as well. So I will just say, stay tuned, come to that webinar. And by the time we have that webinar, I'll have a better answer to that question. There's a second question. Oh, actually, the question about MOR-EV trucks. The MOR-EV trucks does not apply. Well, actually, it applies based on vehicle weight. So some SUVs are heavy enough that they are considered MOR-EV truck worthy and not. Caroline, I'm wondering do you mind pulling up the list of eligible vehicles for MOR-EV trucks so we can look at that?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, the R1, the Rivian R2, the SUV version of the Rivian may qualify, but we'll just pull up the list to see. And while you're doing that, there's one question that's a little bit more policy based, so I'm gonna answer this as Green Energy Consumers Alliance, not as the MOR-EV program, but there's a question about what we think about the proposed federal tax of $250 per year on electric vehicles. If you haven't seen, this is an idea that has been put forward in legislation on the federal level, and the purported purpose is to make up for the loss of federal gas tax revenue from electric vehicles. Um, Consumer Reports has a really good blog post on this that I'm happy to share, but we think that it is a bad idea. We all the science says we need to accelerate EV adoption, but even if you take out the climate argument, the numbers just don't add up. If you look at what a comparable gas car would pay into the federal gas tax, the $250 per year on EVs is disproportionately high. And it does not address the larger question or the larger problem about transportation funding, which is we have not raised the gas tax in many, many years. So it's not gone up with inflation. So the value of the dollars that we're collecting from it has decreased over time. And construction costs on our federal roads have increased. And so those are big systemic issues that have nothing to do with EVs that need to be addressed. But this $250 per year on EVs is pretty purely political. So we definitely oppose that. But thank you, Caroline. Here's the list of vehicles that qualify for MOR-EV truck. So would you mind scrolling down to Rivian?
Yeah.
So the R1S is an SUV. The R1T is their pickup truck. The R1S, I think, is their SUV. So there are some in there, but I think most vehicles that are SUVs don't qualify because they're not heavy enough. I do see a couple people raising their hands. We don't unmute people during webinars like this, so if you could please put your question in the Q&A chat, where we'd be happy to respond to it there. Okay, so I think we've answered all of the questions we see here in the chat. Again, if you have any further questions, I think you can email me or Caroline. We'll send out the webinar recording and slides, and I think with that we can end this and wish you all a good afternoon.
Thanks for joining us today.
Take care, everyone.
Bye bye.